Everyone knows that the brain consists of cells, but not everyone knows how these cells work. Neurons perform different functions. They form a whole universe. In every situation, the neural circuit is the first to respond. When you practice yoga, you may struggle at first. You want, but it doesn't work out. That you are ready, but don't know how to do it. This is due to the activity of the brain. It requires 21 days of regular practice and a little of effort to reprogram the neurons. You can't even imagine what you can achieve if you really and truly want it. Good afternoon, Master. Sairam. Today we're going to discuss a very interesting topic, our brain and neurons. Could you please explain, at least briefly, what neurons are, where they are located, and what their function is? Neurons are brain cells. They are located in the brain. If you have one, as I often joke, everyone knows that the brain consists of cells, but not everyone knows how these cells work. Neurons perform different functions. They form a whole universe. To understand how the brain functions, it's crucial to understand how the neurons function. A neuron is believed to be an energy information network of the entire universe that is in the head of everyone. Contemporary scientists know about this. This is why this organ, the brain, should be worked with very often, very seriously, and very carefully. It's vital for people to understand that everything they see is recorded in the brain, thus forming the neural network. In yoga, working immediately with the brain involves the transformation of consciousness. Our consciousness relies on the activity of the brain. The brain is a tool. But in ordinary consciousness, in an ordinary human being, the brain becomes dominant and the person starts to live according to the commands of the brain. Instead of the person using their brain, our mind gives us orders to follow. Then the essence of the human being, the spirit, becomes dependent on these orders to this or that extent. By the way, it is linked to the neural activity. What are neurons and how do they work? The task of the neural circuit, or the neuron, is to transmit electrical and chemical signals essential for the brain to function and exist. There are various types of neurons that are in charge of different functions of the brain. For example, we have efferent neurons. They transmit electrical and chemical signals to our muscles, to the structures of our body. We have afferent, or sensory, receptor neurons perceiving the energy informational component of the outer world that the brain will process. For example, when we feel cold, the brain immediately responds, because activated neurons transmit the respective information. Touch, heat, any other physical impact on the body are all linked to the neural activity. The neurons immediately communicate a signal to the brain that responds to the received information. When you touch something very hot, your hand would jerk back. This is the work of our neurons. The connection is established in a moment. We also have associative neurons. They don't perceive information, but rather connect the first group of neurons with the second one. This is an even more sophisticated type of neuron that perceives more complex influences. For example, taste and smell that require a deeper analysis. This is an oversimplified explanation. I think one can and should study all this to understand how you function, how this vehicle, the human body, works, and how to work with this vehicle. In every situation, the neural circuit is the first to respond. It builds up a concept in a fraction of a second. Why? Because the human ego is shaped via the influences on the neural circuit and the influences on the body. For example, on seeing a bright flash of light, I felt uncomfortable. My neurons captured it. The brain took a snap of it right away, processed and analyzed it. And the next time I will respond to the same conditions accordingly, pleasant or not, good or bad. This is how the ego is shaped. It is shaped through our 5 basic senses: sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. These are receptors that perceive information and immediately send it to the brain, thus forming the neural circuit. But this is a delusion, because life is constantly changing, because it is not real. And how then can we perceive the objective reality that is beyond the brain function? For this, we meditate. We practice yoga that restructures the neural activity, the function of the neural circuit. They go on performing their function. Neurons are cells that have tails for communication with the space. They receive information via these tails, input and output, and thus the energy information field is communicated. Scientists call it electrical signals. They also transmit chemical signals. The neurons have spaces that are called synapses. These are spaces between cells where the information is processed at a subtler level. This is a complex mechanism, a sophisticated mechanism. And when we analyze the neural circuit, the nerve cell, we can realize how great the Creator is, how tremendous everything is. When you understand how it works, you'll see that everything is magnificent and sublime, that everything is as complex as it is genuinely simple. If you study yourself, you are also learning about God. This is why prophets used to say that those who know themselves know the universe. Those who know themselves know the Creator. All of this we have within. When you practice yoga, you may struggle at first. You say that you lack willpower, that you lack something, that you want but it doesn't work out, that you are ready but don't know how to do it. This is due to the activity of the brain, of the 5 basic senses that have formed the neural circuits this way, and now the brain responds the way you have programmed it. It requires 21 days of regular practice and a little of effort to reprogram the neurons, to reprogram the neural connections, to create new connections, shall we say. By creating new connections, you can create a new body, you can create a new life, because your neural circuits are your universe. You are in constant communication with it. There is a special space between neurons through which the divine energy of the ether, the spatial ether, this divine power, gets into your brain and nourishes your cells. Because the brain is a very subtle substance. Actually, it's a liquid. Certain types of neurons specialize in transmitting impulses that are linked to the medulla oblongata and spinal cord. Together, they all continuously shape a new universe, here and now. It is deemed that the human brain is made up of about 100 million nerve cells on average. But it's impossible to determine the exact number because cells constantly die, regenerate, and so on. But it is believed that at a given time, if the conditions are good, on average, 1,400 neurons, 1,400 brain cells can be regenerated. Before, the scientists stated that nerve cells don't regenerate, but now they openly say that they do. But one must work with the brain. In Kriya, we have special exercises for energization that help create hemispheric and interhemispheric connections, new neural connections. The brain needs continuous exercise. If we want to become perfect, universal, we should rewire our brain. It is done via spiritual practice, via hemispheric activity, via our work with the brain, via practicing Kriya techniques. They are techniques that facilitate your work with the brain. The mind sends signals, energy, information, thus giving orders to everything else, your body. This is how it functions. This is a brief, superficial explanation of how the neurons function. They process not only information that we get from external sources, but as well information that we get from on high, from within. This is spiritual perception. This is the priority. The human mind. A human who is unprepared for such perceptions, who hasn't developed their neurons, can't see what transcends the mind. They need to boost their brain power. Normally, ordinary people use only a small percentage of their brain power. This is why, when you meditate, when you energize your body and enter a deep state of peace and contemplation, you can see, understand, and feel, even in an ordinary state of mind, what is beyond the realms of possibility and beyond the visible. Such people become perfect. Such people can hear music that no one else hears. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and others. Great composers, writers, artists, paranormalists, spiritual leaders endowed with superpowers have or had a very developed brain. If you don't want your life to be void of sense, if you want to get as much of God's grace as possible in this life, develop your neural circuits, awaken and rewire your brain, force it to function as it is designed to. This is the approach to follow. And spiritual practice, sadhana, helps achieve this in the most universal way. It takes time and effort. But over time, I often say that it's hard to set a laden cart in motion, but once you've got it moving, it takes less effort to make it go faster by pushing it. The same is true here. When you start to practice, it seems a little hard for you to embrace it all, because your neurons are underdeveloped yet. Your neural circuits are underdeveloped. In the course of this work, you build up neural circuits and change your attitude to this world. The world also begins to treat you differently. The analysis is done at a subtler level. It's more powerful. The brain becomes very powerful. It develops by leaps and bounds. In Kriya, your brain becomes more and more perfect by the hour. When the brain is perfect, the vehicle is perfect too. Because what you transmit to your every cell is consciousness. It relies on your consciousness, on the activity of your brain and central nervous system. And here impulses are transmitted from higher centers that are to be found at subtler levels. We don't only have a physically manifested brain, but astral brain as well. It contains energy and information. All this transmits knowledge and possibilities, and you become capable of many things. You can create. You become God's ultimate tool for creativity. Such people are called collaborators. Co means together. Working together. Co is the highest power that works within you. That's perfection. Such people become siddhas, complete and perfect. That's what your brain is. As I have already said, in Kriya Yoga, our spinal cord becomes a thinking being that processes information in the same way as the brain does and performs very deep analysis. It doesn't merely transmit impulses, as it used to. The entire brain begins to work as one whole. I call it the merging of all chakras into one whole. And you attain Advaita, a non-dual state. But these nuances are for the seminar. You have said some words about practice. Can you provide an example of how the science of Kriya enables practitioners to develop their brain and neural circuits? Possibly. There are plenty of examples. It'll be easier for you to understand what's going on if you make sense of how the brain functions. Scientists have just begun to talk about it, but yogis have known it for thousands of years. All this knowledge is available to us. But scientists are not used to taking things for granted. They want to see and touch before they believe. It's okay. It's their choice. But they could believe first and then see and touch. Only a believer materializes opportunities. It's essential to understand how the brain functions, how its lobes function, the anterior lobe, the posterior lobe, how the brain works as a whole in all its manifestations according to various concepts, what its reactions are. When we feel cold or hot, where does the brain's response originate? If you're interested, learn about it. I want to say that the spiritual component that we call God, or the Creator, all spiritual practitioners strive to merge their consciousness with the higher consciousness, right? But how does this higher consciousness manifest within the brain? It's important to understand which specific information is processed in the anterior lobe of the brain, for example, how it unites good and bad. What role this anterior lobe of the brain plays in the transformation of consciousness. When an energy informational component emerges from the subconscious mind to remind us of certain events, whether pleasurable or painful, why is this information processed in the anterior lobe? Why not in the posterior? Why does the sincipital part of the brain respond to more spiritual and soft states, for example, love or compassion for this world? Why do the brain regions respond in this or that way? One must understand all of this. Our practice enables practitioners and meditators to realize all this. They begin to have feelings in different parts of the body. Even people who work with the brain say, you know, I've noticed that bad thoughts come from the left, some positive thoughts come from the right, or thoughts come from the sides. Some people have images above or behind. These reactions of the brain are very individual. But there are certain brain regions, anterior and posterior lobes, etc., that immediately respond to external influences and to the internal influences. Thus, we can understand, for example, which part of the brain perceives God as a feeling. When one says, I feel God or the Creator, I feel the sublime power. A specific lobe is active at this moment, while other lobes are less active. When one has images, another lobe is active. When the analysis becomes deep, for example, they work on certain aspects using their willpower to settle certain issues within their consciousness. The anterior lobe of the brain is active. When we raise our eyes, we carry out self-evaluation. Why do we raise our eyes in Shambhavi Mudra and fix the gaze there? It facilitates processing the information that we get from the subconscious mind. Our brain is a perfect machine, capable of responding to very subtle things. If you practice spirituality, meditate and use Kriya Yoga techniques, you will make your brain perfect in a very short time and be able to recognize this world not as it seems to you, but as it really is, beyond ordinary things. You will see farther both forward and backward. All this is the function of the soul, consciousness, and brain that analyzes this information. To understand what's going on the astral plane, you have to analyze it. This is also the function of the brain. It brings this information to the surface so that you can share it. This is irrelevant, however, to spontaneous things like flashes of understanding. I'm talking about the management of this process. This is a managed process. And when one meditates on something, say on the Creator or love or God, certain brain regions become active. I'm not talking about a 5-minute meditation, but rather about an everyday spiritual practice that should last at least 40 to 50 minutes or an hour. And it will happen very fast. This is why I advise to practice energization in both sitting and standing posture. The 42 Kriyas that activate the neural circuits. We can rewire our brain, freeing it from its old, unnecessary, lazy state. We can rewrite the information and give it an impulse to make it work, to make the neurons work. Don't forget that there are special portals between neurons that are immediately connected with our willpower, with the Holy Spirit, with God that no one knows anything about. If you want to know Him, work with your neurons. Via neurons, you will feel the atoms of your body. Everything is made up of atoms. Neurons can stay connected with it, with this energy informational component, our universe. Because every neuron is connected to another neuron, every atom is connected to another atom, wherever you are. Every atom is one part of the universe, instantaneously communicating with another atom in another part of the universe, of the world. Absolutely everything is connected, including the neural network. Develop all of this. You have just mentioned that over time, the spinal cord awakens and begins to function like the brain. How does it happen? How does this benefit a human being? There are plenty of benefits: development, an ability to see and hear. The most important thing in the spiritual development is that our spine is not only manifested on the physical plane, but on the astral plane as well. This is an altar. On the subtle plane, we have chakras along the spine. What are chakras? They are portals to other dimensions. They are not mere energy clots that are there for a purpose. They make up a whole world. And when your spinal cord becomes capable of thinking, it can sense these worlds. You will be able to be present in these worlds simultaneously. There will be no difference for you between the astral world and the physical world. You won't differentiate between them. You will feel that they are interconnected. Do you remember how we say in Kriya, God became flesh? To many people it sounds very strange. We identify this great divine being with body. How is it possible? Some think it's blasphemy. It's because they don't see the dependencies. They don't understand that this energy and power, opportunities, consciousness, everything are concentrated here. Of course, God is not a body, but He expressed all He is in the microcosmos of His spiritual power. In fact, He solidified and manifested in a body. This is what it means. We should understand that our body is a perfect multifunctional element of God. And the Creator relies on it. But our mind can analyze it detachedly, disassociated from it. This is why Satya Sai says, man minus ego. If our mind concentrates on the divine, our whole being will turn to the divine. Man minus ego equals God. So in this sense, yes, He becomes body. Because He has manifested, He has expressed Himself. Our body doesn't differ from God, absolutely, because there is nothing but God. And it's only natural that a body is His manifestation. This is why the spine becomes a thinking being. We are capable of realizing it. It's challenging to explain now, because a detailed explanation requires much time, and we don't need it now. You just know the strategy. the direction. When you begin to practice, you'll understand how everything changes in your consciousness. Whatever I tell you, I don't read all this. Do you think I sit and immerse myself in books? I don't have time for this. The knowledge that I share is my personal experience. I speak about that which I understand myself and that which I possess. And I'd like all practitioners to have this opportunity, to possess this, having attained it through personal experience. By the way, meditation is not about visualizing something for yourself. Meditation is an ability to have what you meditate on. If you don't have it, it means you haven't embraced it. Those who haven't embraced it are not capable of anything. If I study a medical treatise, what's the use? I can't perform operations because I don't have such experience. When I say that you should become a laboratory for yourself, I mean that you, as a consciousness, as if you were a professor or a university entrant, doesn't matter. That you have an opportunity to fully explore the universe, the Creator Himself, in this lab. Only in this lab, there is no other place for doing it. If you read a myriad of books, you won't achieve anything. It won't be more than mere information until you set to inner work. If you really want to live this life right, to live longer and have time to do more, everyone wants to live longer if they cling to life. You should work towards this goal. There is every reason for you to immerse your consciousness in yourself. A musician, for example, I make music. Some musicians say to me, "How can you compose this kind of music without taking any kind of substances? We can't understand it." You know what I mean? But I don't need it, because it's within. I have feelings, I have an understanding, I have a desire, I have energy, and, importantly, I have ideas. You do it because this is your nature. You need no supplementary means. The same is true here. You don't need anything to understand God. You don't need, God forbid, any chemical substances, because it's a delusion, a trap. What you need is to master self-understanding. Explore yourself. Use body energization techniques. Transform your bodily consciousness. You can't even imagine what you can achieve if you really and truly want it. You don't even imagine what is possible. There are no words to describe it. Take, for example, the pyramid of ascension of the soul to the spirit. Do you know how the final stage is called? Indescribable. And it's endless. You go through stages, and in the long run, you approach the indescribable, because there are no words to describe it. It's within, and you have it. Isn't that inspiring? Otherwise, you'll have to live like everybody else. However, I think that the idea of becoming a feeble old person with a cane in one hand who's being led to dinner doesn't seem tempting to you at all. What's the point in living like that? You have said some words about growing up. Can you tell us when the neurons degrade or die down? What factors are at play? First of all, it's an energy information component. All social networks. They cause neuronal degradation. I'll explain why. On the one hand, you read, you develop, and it seems to you that clip consciousness is a good thing. You get information. What trace does this information leave in you? Just imagine how much rubbish. The analysis and selection are ongoing. Naturally, cells to die. What will the dead cells be replaced with? What kind of connections do you establish when you watch it all? The same is true for alcohol and smoking. You kill your neurons, you kill your brain cells. 50 grams of cognac will make any human happy. But the drinker doesn't even imagine how many cells will be removed from the body after. What causes a hangover? Why do people suffer from headaches? Because the body is intoxicated with its own dead cells. They will be removed from the body. Neurons are excreted in urine. Our elimination system eliminates the most valuable thing we have, the power of awareness that we get with the help of tools that we call neurons or cells. This is why our brain degrades. There is also another form of brain degradation, Parkinson's disease. This is a karmic disease. Certain things are blocked and the brain development stops due to specific reasons. The number of dying cells exceeds that of regenerating cells, and the person becomes feeble. It has to do with karma, but even in this state I am sure one can work with the brain. There are known cases, we know about it. People begin to feel better at least, they slow down this process. Epileptics who practice the 42 Kriyas regenerate everything, they stop the process of degradation. There are many examples. As a rule, these are stressful situations. Why are they stressful? Attachment. I want it to be this way, but it happens otherwise. One expected to receive a lot of money, but was let down. One was very attached to this idea, wanted it desperately, but they took it away from him. The space took it away from him when he didn't manage to get it. He is stressed. A bottle of cognac. I saw such people who dampened stress this way. They just couldn't bear it because their attachment was so strong that only a bottle of cognac was a remedy. They had to go through treatment later. They couldn't earn money in this state, couldn't do anything, because it's silly. This attitude of, just to spite grandma, I'll freeze my ears off. So if you want to keep your brain functioning, work with it. The simplest exercise is reading, if you have time. Read books. Create positive images and work with them. This is the simplest way. In yoga, there are many techniques. All it takes is to begin. In his time, Gurdjieff showed good techniques of illogical actions, deeds, thoughts. He performed actions that activated both hemispheres. Different motions that kept the brain continuously active. You see? Complex actions. This approach has become very popular. Complex actions can't be mastered quickly. One progresses step by step, and their brain begins to develop. Toddlers and preschoolers are invited to do crafts that facilitate brain development and improve visual thinking. They model, sculpt, put together jigsaw puzzles, or build Lego blocks, manipulate small objects to develop fine motor skills. All this is linked to neurons. This is why children like beading, making figurines, beautiful things, creating beauty. It's the nature of every person. Over time, after so many days spent in Instagram or Facebook, people forget the most important thing. They lose creativity. Sometimes they may see something beautiful in the newsfeed. This is mostly rubbish that programs their brain. The brain degrades. It dies. Because God is in the neurons. Have you heard about this documentary? Yes, we have gradually moved to another topic, as I see it. What's the main idea of the film? The mirroring quality of neurons. We become what we look at. We become what affects us. Meditation is a state in which you not only offset this impact, but you get control over it and become the master of it. This is what I'm talking about. Whatever you don't know affects you. And you don't know how social media affects you. This is a hyperspace, a virtual space. If you are in control of it, it's just fine. But ask anyone to give it all up. No, I control it, I understand everything, I know everything. They don't understand how their brain functions. They don't understand how it all happens. They think they do. They are like a drinker who says, no, I'm not a drinker, I don't booze, I control it all. When in fact they passed this phase long ago. They don't control it. Many people who strive for power know about it. This is why these ideas are being implemented. It works at the level of symbols. Symbols have an enormous power. The entire world is based on symbols. So get knowledge and personal power through development. I'd like to talk about The God is in the Neurons documentary. I watched it recently. The scientists clearly state that they continue their investigations, which does not fall within the scope of metaphysics. Only yogis and mystics go into a deeper and wider discourse. If neurons are connected with God, which techniques can speed up the evolution of our brain and help us build the neural network? Apart from Babaji's Kriya Yoga in particular, or yoga in particular, there are certain conditions that facilitate developing the neurons and boosting your brain power. I'm talking about various trainings. It's a very popular trend nowadays. People develop their abilities. For example, they learn to write with both hands simultaneously, or to draw different figures simultaneously. It's a very good method. These are the simplest techniques, but there are very complex schemes as well. For example, to visualize events in a linear fashion, to make calculations, to imagine. These types of activities require imagination. To create holograms in one's consciousness. To create, to draw, while keeping the contours, all this is done by the brain. Tesla made use of such creative thinking in his time. Where he lacked knowledge, he made calculations within, in his inner consciousness, and created images to find an opportunity to look at this form, or formula, or event of his choice from another perspective, to analyze it and make a conclusion. This is why he knew quite a lot. So it's very important to use your imagination. We are talking about brain development. But at the initial stage, imagination can be an obstacle to stepping over one's ego, personality. This is another thing, and here one has to use their imagination differently. In Kriya, you know, we distinguish between 6 spinal centers that are linked to the zodiac signs. This is a full year cycle, 6 up and 6 down. And when you make a conscious effort to raise your consciousness, moving your gaze up and down, using Kriya techniques in your inner work, working within the spine, you go through 1 year of your evolution. You can accelerate evolution by developing the brain and awakening the chakras, energizing the spine, energizing the chakras, energizing the brain as a whole. I talk about it in more detail during seminars, so I'm not going to dwell on it now. Just know that to accelerate your evolution, as well as involution, can be sped up as a result of your brain degrading. The evolution can be sped up through inner work. When you raise your consciousness that takes the form of breathing up to the highest center and bring it down, you go through 1 year of your evolution, through each of the 12 zodiac signs around the sun. By the way, our sun, the solar system, is also spinning around another sun. No one talks about this. The same happens within us. And you can speed up your evolution when you do it consciously. Thus, you gain knowledge by uncovering the internal that was given to you from on high. Having knowledge, you can learn from within those things that haven't yet happened in the outer world. Because everything happens, first of all, within and then without. There's no use hunting for external information, it's in the past. When you grow within, you become aware of the internal that gives birth to external. First comes the idea, then emerges the universe. And when you explore the universe, of course, you can understand what's going on within you. But if you get awareness of what's going on within, you are sure to understand what's happening in the external world and how everything works. This is why I have said today that those who know themselves know the universe. At that level, you can indulge in absolute creativity. But the brain can get tired. It needs inspiration and so on. This is why we have to sleep. To keep your brain functioning and your life going, to preserve yourself, you should take your nutrition very seriously, both at the energy, information, and physical levels. We are what we eat. Focus on your breathing, learn to control it, and perform special pranayamas. Be sure to get quality sleep. Your relationship with your partner, I mean sexual relationships of a man and a woman, must be very good and elevated if you have a partner. Otherwise, transform this energy. Because it also forms neurons, it gives life, strange as it may seem, if you do everything right. Because interaction is a science. Interaction of the two sexes, interaction of these two energies creates a tremendous power. This is very important. It's natural. This is why people want to marry. They don't just know how to handle it and waste this energy of the relationship for everyday routine. It's what the mind does. Nowadays, this knowledge is available to us, and we can sustain life and accelerate evolution via yoga practice or other techniques that are also elements of yoga. There is nothing that is not yoga. There are well-known psychologists, healers, simple bloggers who speak about this or that universal method for brain development. All this is yoga. These are elements of yoga. They are not positioned as yogic knowledge anymore, but in reality it all exists and there is nothing more to invent. All this is available to us. Whatever you might think about, it already exists in this space. You just take it and use it. You can improve something to your liking. By the way, it also involves your brain function, your consciousness that relies on this tool, the brain. For those who have one.